dun, 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 dun. What a theme. We've had a sponsor for about a decade, and while they're not into being vigilantes any more than we are, they can get behind the idea of justice being served. You killed my parents? Well, I'm going to help you fall to your death. And after I go back to my very big house that night, I'm going to pour myself a beverage. Maybe it'll be whiskey, maybe it'll be wine, maybe it'll be beer or water, or maybe it'll be Spark Plug coffee. Spark Plug offers the freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans in this country that we like to call Canada. We like to call it that because that's what it is called. Those of us up here and those down in America will get whatever they order within a week, and Canadians get to enjoy free shipping. Billionaires can use that free shipping. And what will be shipped are a choice of many blends and roasts, including rotating seasonal blends. Don't fret, half-calf or decaf fans. You can get either of those, too. Maybe you're like me and you wouldn't want to be a member of any club that would have you as a member, but Sparkplug's Autopilot Coffee Club is different. They're all about flexibility. You can cancel or even just pause your membership anytime. Plus, you'll get perks and deals, and you'll save money on every single order. This is not a generic Coffee of the Month club, you rogues gallery. Sponsors usually dole out promo codes. Ours is HYES. The website to go to is sparkplug.coffee, then add that /HYES. Go that way and you'll save 20% off your very next order. Well, chums, the Winged Vigilante is on deck. We got to get to it. And action! Have you ever seen Batman? Hi, all you bats and clowns and reporters and photojournalists, and welcome to the 585th episode that can be downloaded or streamed on this podcasting channel. Have You Ever Seen goes back into cinema's past and reviews films that interest us, and we toss off all sorts of spoilers your way during these talk fests. Now, I said we, and this is a Monday, but this is the first of many episodes in the next few weeks that will be a monologue. I'm Ryan Ellis, your Bat fan who will probably slip into Dark Knight impressions a few times today. But my wife Bev, Harley Quinn, Batman, she's not Harley Quinn. My wife Bev won't be here for a while because she had heel surgery at the beginning of the month and will be recovering for quite a while yet. She's on the mend, actually, as I record this, which is about a week before it gets posted. You won't be hearing her voice until, well, we'll see. Sometime in late May, I expect, or maybe it's not going to be till June. So when I review motion pictures on my own, I follow the plot sequentially, although I go off in many tangents and often ask reasonably good questions. Just reasonably, not actually good. I like to say hello to my friend Tomfoolery, fairly often too, mostly because I love that word, and I don't hesitate to sing here and there during these extravaganzas, or to hum the theme song to a great movie, or to do impressions of famous folks. But before I do start talking about the plot, let's see what critics and various esteemed bodies think or have thought about Batman. So The Man in the Cowl was released by Warner Brothers about 2 months shy of 35 years ago on June 23rd, 1989. And Tim Burton's superhero super movie was, of course, a massive success. It was the very biggest hit of 1989, outgrossing fellow huge hit Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade by more than 50 million smackers. So Indy did great, this did even greater. And even after all this time, the Caped Crusaders' breakout in 1989 is 57th on Box Office Mojo's Top 200, adjusted for inflation. But how about the sequels? How did they do? Well, Batman Returns ended up third at the box office in 1992, ranking it a lot less than its predecessor did, even if it certainly was also a blockbuster. Batman Forever came out 3 years after Returns did, and the Val Kilmer one was second in 1995, not too far behind Toy Story for number one. And that's 170th on that adjusted for inflation Top 200. But Batman and Robin in 1997 barely cleared 100 million, and it ended up just 12th at the box office. So Burton made a few hits there, then it was Joel Schumacher's turn, then not so much, and the second one he did. And then we know the Christopher Nolan trilogy did very well too. The Dark Knight is 33rd on the adjusted for inflation list, and The Dark Knight Rises is 73rd. As for the Snyderverse version of Mr. Wayne, well, that has mixed results. By the way, Batman Begins did well, the first one that Nolan did, but not on the shortlist for adjusted for inflation Top 200. Batman v Superman and Justice League, so we're back to Snyder here now, did make money, especially when you factor in worldwide grosses, and you should, it's money, but so much more was expected of a team-up of those two characters, not to mention the additions of Wonder Woman, Aquaman, The Flash, and Cyborg. Speaking of Superman, one of the reasons this got greenlit in the late 80s is because of the massive box office haul of Superman and Superman 2 in the late 70s and early 80s. Yet even though the studios had to be hungry to see if Batman could draw as many eyeballs as Kal-El did, it took more than a decade to get a Batman movie onto the big screen. And maybe that was because of the huge shift in tone from the bright colors and joy that's in Superman. The Rotten Tomatoes reviews for this franchise are up and down, but for Batman '89, they aren't too bad. It sits at 76% from the critics, should be higher, and 84% from the audiences. There are 139 reviews on the site, and the average is 7 out of 10. Batman Returns actually outdoes that and is at 82% from the critics, but Batman Forever, which I like quite a lot, so I don't jibe with this, is only at 41%. Big splat there. That number's not great, but Batman and Robin was savaged and only has 12% good reviews on the site. The worst critical rating for Nolan's trilogy is Batman Begins, which does have a very nice 85% rating, so that's the worst of the three. It's still great, or still very good anyway. The Dark Knight is at 94%, and Dark Knight Rises has 87% positive critical reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. The Affleck version of Batsy in the 2010s was usually crapped on by the critical community, although the Snyder Cut of Justice League that came out in 2021 does get a nice fresh tomatoes, in the mid-70s, I believe. The 1989 Batman won an Oscar. That was for Anton Furst and Peter Young's art direction. Jack Nicholson was nominated for the BAFTA and the Golden Globe, but there was no Oscar candidacy that year for the man who would eventually win 3 of them, and already had won twice. Movies like this, action flicks, fantasy flicks, didn't tend to get much Oscar love back then, and that's usually true even now. But I think this movie was worthy of all kinds of technical nods, at least, and I personally would have had it up for Best Picture and Best Director, and maybe even Nicholson for his nutty performance. I watched Anton Furst's Oscar acceptance speech, by the way. He seems like he's either a little loopy in general, or was just loopy that night. And I say Furst's acceptance speech, not his and Peter Young's, because while Peter went up there with Anton and looked like he wanted to say something, he didn't get to. Batman Returns was nominated for the makeup and the visual effects, while Danny DeVito also got a nomination for Worst Supporting Actor at the Razzie Awards. That seems quite unfair to me. And he's going to come up in a good one in a few seconds here. Batman Forever was up for 3 Oscars, cinematography, sound, and sound effects, but didn't win any of them. U2's Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me was up for many good awards, but it was also up for a Razzie for Worst Song. The Razzies were weird those couple of years with the Batman movies. I don't agree with any of those Razzie choices. Although this one I do, because Batman and Robin was nominated for 11 Razzie Awards, and even won one of those, Alicia Silverstone for Worst Supporting Actress, although Schwarzenegger should have won for sure for whatever, lead or supporting actor. God, he was terrible. Not that Clooney was good either. As for the Nolan-verse, Batman Begins was nominated for only 1 Oscar, Wally Pfister's cinematography. The Dark Knight is perhaps the most acclaimed superhero movie of all time, and it took home trophies for Heath Ledger as Best Supporting Actor, and for the sound effects. It famously did not get a Best Picture nomination, which is one reason we have 10 Best Picture nominees now, and for a while there it was up to 10. But the cinematography, editing, visual effects, sound, makeup, and the sets were all candidates for Gold Naked Guys for The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight Rises, though, nada at the big show. I guess people didn't like that name and didn't think John Blake should go by that name. Robin. I didn't write down any Oscar bona fides for the DCEU versions of the character. I don't think there are any, actually. There are some for Joker, the Joaquin Phoenix movie. He repeated Ledger's achievement and won an Oscar for playing the Joker. Todd Phillips' flick was nominated for a lot of other awards too, including Best Picture and him for Best Director. The American Film Institute had a lot of time for the 1989 Batman. The Knight himself was 46 on the good side, and the Joker was 45th on the bad side of their top 100 heroes and villains list. The AFI also nominated this one for the top 100 thrills, the fantasy category of the top 100 genres, the top 100 quotes, where the Joker says, "Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight?" The 1998 AFI Top 100 list, although not the 2007 list, so that's the greatest movies of all time, and for the top 25 music scores on the AFI's list. The music certainly should have been nominated for an Oscar, by the way. As for the sequels, the only AFI thing for any of them is that Catwoman and Penguin from Batman Returns were nominated for AFI's top 50 villains, repudiating that Razzie nomination for DeVito. You couldn't load up that list with too many bad guys from the Batman franchise, so it's hard to argue against them only being nominated, while Nicholson's Joker did in fact make it. If Heath Ledger's Joker had been eligible, because they did that list before 2008, God, where would they rank him? Top 10? Top 5? Bev and I recently talked about this. You had 3 monumental villains in 3 straight years, and they all won Oscars, and they all should have. Javier Bardem as Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men, Heath Ledger as the Joker in The Dark Knight, and Christoph Waltz as Hans Landa in Inglourious Bastards. Redo that top 50 villains list, just hypothetically, and you'd have to include all 3 of those guys, and probably pretty highly ranked, too. I should also mention that we've covered The Dark Knight, which was back in July 2018, so look for that in the archives. And in a way, we discussed Joker, too, because it came up during the Oscars preview. in 2020 for the 2019 movies. And The Dark Knight, incidentally, was put into the National Film Registry in 2020. I thought maybe this movie, Batman, was too, but I looked again just before I started recording and I don't see it in there. I also just realized I didn't include the Batman in this thing, the Pattinson one from a couple years ago. I believe the critics liked it about as much as they did the Nolan movies. Maybe not quite as much, actually, but around there. Plus, it was up for a handful of technical Oscars, and it made a lot of money worldwide. It also put Bev to sleep, which is a rare feat. She almost never conks out while we're peeping in a motion picture. I liked it just fine, though. I'm not sure I'm going to watch it again. It is about 3 hours long. Okay, we know the entire series of Batman films has a lot going for it, facts and figures-wise, but there's also one hell of a story going on here. We have the origin stories for two iconic characters, for one thing. So let's start breaking it all down and see what's what in Batman. We kick it off with some cool opening credits. Dun, 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 dun. He was obviously the bigger name, but in a movie called Batman, it's Jack Nicholson who's top billed for playing the Joker. Michael Keaton comes second, although that's reversed in the end credits. Now what's so cool here is how the camera winds its way through a 3D version of the Batman logo, which only discovers what you're seeing as it gets to the writing and directing credits. I love that touch, and I love Danny Elfman's main theme, although the entire score is marvelous. During this opening, we hear a little of all the musical themes we'll get during the movie proper. But while finding out that people actually made this movie with all the credits, it's time to see people do things, and what we get is a lost family finding themselves in a dangerous alley in Gotham City, similar to how the Wayne family were in an alley behind the Monarch Theater, where Bruce's parents ended up dead when he was just a boy. But this family only gets mugged by two idiots, not killed. One is afraid of the bat, but the other doesn't believe there's a 6-foot bat in Gotham City, until Batman rudely interrupts the money-dividing festivities. The man in black kicks one through a door and scares the other half to death, holding him over a high ledge and letting him know, "I'm Batman." It's funny to think that the one thing above all that Bruce Wayne wants is for no other child to lose their parents in a senseless robbery. But he doesn't do anything about this robbery. He catches the two thieves and they're arrested, yes, but those two putzes could have shot that family in the alley, so we can't expect Batman to be clairvoyant and stop all crime from ever happening. But let's be honest about what he's doing. He seems to be more into retribution than he's into crime prevention, and that's appropriate here for Revenge Month on this channel, and this is the last movie of Revenge Month. Batman leaves theatrically, and the hoodlums are arrested, so we're introduced to reporter Alexander Knox and dirty cop Lieutenant Eckhart. Get me Lieutenant Eckhart. Robert Wool is Knox, and William Hootkins is the cop who's on the mob boss's payroll we're going to meet later, Carl Grissom. Lieutenant Eckhart here won't answer Knox's questions about Batman. These two slipped on a banana peel. I can't do his voice. Who they don't yet know is even calling himself Batman because he just told one of the stick-up men as he was scaring the guy half to death. I guess word will get out quickly, though. The story moves in this film, so on we go to meet District Attorney Harvey Dent at a banquet. He gets a raucous ovation, but Billy D. Williams' finest moment as Dent pretty much happens here, because Tommy Lee Jones and then Aaron Eckhart got the Harvey role in future Bat films. Although Billy D's hair is phenomenal in this, even though you think he wouldn't keep using stuff in his hair after Gotham's beauty products are poisoned. Anyway, Jack Nicholson gets his first on-screen moment here as Jack Napier, flipping cards and watching the Dent speech on TV. Then he's flipping Jerry Hall's hair out of his face when she leans in too close. Jackie Boy is sleeping with his crime boss's girlfriend and doesn't seem all that worried that Carl Grissom might find out, nor does he worry that she'll leave him, even though he's quite a dick to her. She does leave him later on, doesn't she, in a way? And he looks fine, and he didn't ask. There was hostility between Eckhart and the reporter. Love that, by the way. You got Eckhart as a character name here, and then the actor Aaron Eckhart played a character in this series many years in the future, and I think he was awesome as Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight. Anyway, the dirty cop meets Jack in an alley. Always alleys in this movie, because it's time for the man of the law to get his payoff. They don't like each other, and they have some words. Some killing could have happened because Eckhart does pull his gun, but Tracy Walter as Bob the Goon quickly backs up Jack with his own gun. I love that Napier is so confident about Bob getting in the cop's face with a gun, or maybe he just doesn't care if he's shot dead. But either way, he just stands there being cool. He's already a little nuts. The story points move fast. The mayor wants a big parade for the city's birthday, but citizens are afraid to go downtown with all the crime going on. Meanwhile, Knox meets Vicky Vale in his office. Kim Basinger plays the award-winning photographer who's come to the big city because she read Alex's stories about Batman, and she likes bats. She also, just like Knox does, thinks getting the skinny on who Batman is and getting some pictures of him in action could win them a Pulitzer Prize. Pulitzer? I always say that wrong. Or I often say it wrong. Maybe 50-50. Jack Palance isn't in this movie for very long, but he's pretty great as mob boss Carl Grissom. Son of a bitch! He's cheesed off that his business at Axis Chemicals is about to be raided by the cops, so he and his well-suited underlings plan to clean the place out before that can happen. But the real operation is to get Eckhart and his men to unexpectedly, to Jack and his men at least, interrupt the clean-out and kill the man who's getting to bumping with his gangster mole, Alicia. Oh, Carl, over a woman? A woman! Your number one guy is too valuable to just whack over a hot blonde. Anyway, Bruce Wayne is doing what he hates the most, having to be Bruce Wayne, and wear a suit that isn't the bat suit as he hosts a fundraiser to save the festival, the one that the mayor said he really wants to happen. Commissioner Gordon, the mayor, and Dent are all guests at the party, although Gordon leaves early when he finds out about the Axis Chemicals job. He knows he can't trust Eckhart, so he rushes off to deal with it personally. I like the way Pat Hingle plays Gordon. He's nice to his underlings and really cares about their safety during the raid at the plant. Be careful, be very careful. Not just get the guy, whatever it takes. It's be careful, guys. But before we even get to that scene, Bruce meets Vicky and Knox. He chats them both up, but the difference is he doesn't want to sleep with Knox. Although he does tell Alfred to give him a grant to help fund Alex's articles about Batman, I guess. Not bad that the area billionaire is willing to give a muckraking journalist some free money, which could expose him as the Caped Crusader. I don't know if he thought that through. But we're off to the plant to find that Jack and his criminal buddies have been set up by Grissom not to find anything valuable in the Axis Chemicals safe. They've been ratted out here, boys. A shootout ensues with the coppers, and Napier could have gotten away clean, but he sees Eckhart down below, walking around and looking stupid, so Jackie can't resist blowing him away after suggesting, "Hey, Eckhart, think about the future." He's seen the future, and it will be Batman. Bruce has cameras all throughout his house, so he overheard microphones too, so he overheard the cops talk about this job. That means Batman is able to show up for this party too. 2 shindigs in one night. The man's got energy. Of course, so does Gordon. He was at both shindigs too. What's the first thing the Joker ever says to Batman on the big screen? Oh, wait a minute, there was a 1966 movie, wasn't there? I excluded that. All right, whatever. This version and beyond. First thing he ever says, Jesus! When the hero knocks the gun out of the villain's hand and grabs him by the lapels the way he did one of the crooks in the opening scene. Bob threatens to put holes in Commissioner Gordon if Batman doesn't let Jack go, so Batsy listens. Jack does kill Eckhart, then he ends up taking a shot at Batman, who's still hanging around up on the gantry. One of Napes' own shots deflects back off one of the dials in the chemical plant and goes through both sides of his face, both cheeks. I guess that's why he has that hideous smile later on, not just some weird half smile on one side. But we see what the doctor had to work with. Of course, Jack trips over the railing and not only falls into the vat of chemicals down below that he himself had poured into all the big vats as part of his diversion to get away, but it's important to note that Batman did catch him at first. Then he seems to have let him go when he has a flash of recognition. Is Keaton playing the note of, this criminal deserves to drop into poison and die? I won't kill him, but I don't have to save him. Anyway, Jack gets wet in a very crappy way, and he's about to be reborn as the Joker. And as you will see, he'll be happier. A lot. Maybe it's the next day, but Bruce has a date with Vicky at his house, which only feels like a home when they end up eating in the kitchen with the butler Alfred, rather than in the great big intimidating dining room. Bruce is an orphan who had no brothers or sisters, but he tells Vicky that Alfred is his family. So he either cut his uncles, aunts, cousins, and grandparents off some time ago, or they were always just a trio of Waynes and no one else, even before Thomas and Martha died. So while our lovebirds get on nicely, we cut to Jack, who's bandaged up in the shabby office of a mob doctor, who did the best he could, but Napier's chemical bath gave him white skin, green hair, and a hell of a broad smile. Although Burton is smart to not let us see the look of the Joker just yet, because Jack knocks the doc's light and smashes it, then stumbles away, laughing crazily about his own ghoulishness. The man was well dressed and vain before the night at Axis. Now he's looking like this. Although if you love purple and general gaudiness, I guess you could argue he's about to move up in the world style-wise. But in any case, the man loses his mind after being turned into a clown, but it's not like he wasn't a violent sociopath even before this. I'm a little amazed he didn't just murder the doctor on the spot for not doing a better job of fixing his face. Where do you go from there other than confront your boss for setting you up and shooting him dead? Grissom tells him that his life won't be worth spit. But Jack can now do what he wanted to do anyway, take over the whole operation. Ah, what a day. So while Jack was giving himself a promotion, we see that Bruce and Vicky got to bumping up in the Manor's master bedroom. He can't sleep afterwards, but that wine and that good lovin' knocked her right out. The next morning, he dodges getting together with her later that day because, yes, he doesn't want anyone to get too close, anybody, probably even Alfred. But he does have a very important meeting, which will be to visit the site where his parents died in that alley. But before we get to that, we have a big mob meeting with Jack and all the other crime lords. Joker now wears skin-colored makeup to cover his white face, which confuses the other guys because they don't seem to know he was Napier and now is the Joker. By the way, quick thing, in the scene where he kills Grissom and has that purple mark on his neck, that's because the white makeup got on that coat, and rather than try to fix it that way, they just put purple paint on the coat, but the coat touched his neck, and that's why his neck is purple. With this big budget movie, no more takes you could possibly do. Maybe Jack was just great in that take and not as good in other ones. Anyway, Joker uses a very powerful joy buzzer to fry a lippy mob guy named Tony. Then Joker's goons storm in and corner the other gangsters with machine guns. So the clear message is, Joker either gets to take over Carl's racket and the others will fall in line, or he'll grease them all, which he and the corpse of Tony agree is the right course of action. Ritelli was a vicious bastard, and we're all glad he's dead. Bev watched this movie with me, and she loved the touch, as do I, when Nicholson wipes the flesh makeup off his forehead in this scene to reveal white makeup underneath. That's supposed to be his skin now, of course, so it's a cool idea that the actor really has 2 layers of makeup on. And then later on in the museum, when he gets the water splash in his face, same idea. It's a complicated thing they do with the brown makeup with the white face underneath, when, of course, the actual actor, what do you know, doesn't have a white face in reality. As for the non-criminal element in Gotham, Vicky follows Bruce to that alley. He lays 2 roses on the ground and looks sadly at the spot where his parents were shot to death. Bruce then happens upon an impromptu press conference on the steps of City Hall as one of the mob bosses tells Knox and the other reporters that Grissom signed papers to let them take over the business. But Joker and his thugs are all dressed as clowns and mimes and goofing around in the background. They're not very good at that, by the way, which allows Joker the cover to stroll up to Big Fat Benny and throw an arrow-like quill right into the folds of his chin. Because the pen is mightier than the sword, another gangster is dead. Well, you have to give Joker some credit. He's killed 3 mobsters in a matter of days, which is what decent people and the cops should want. I also like the touch that Bruce gets shot through his coat in this scene, although he himself isn't hit by any lead. But he's too stunned to see that Jack Napier is still alive that he doesn't even notice a bullet just miss ripping into him. Only Batman seems to realize this guy is Jack Napier. Bob was following Knox and was taking pictures during all this mayhem, including getting some snaps of Vicky when she comes onto the scene. She can put steam in a man's stride, and she immediately captures Joker's heart, or some other body part. I bet it's white, pure white. He's of a mind to make some mookie, and he's also been working on what we will learn in the next scene is a brutal poison named Smilex, adding it into Gotham's beauty supplies. So I guess Grissom was into making all kinds of products for Gotham. And now Jack is doing it. So we get a news anchor laughing like the Joker before falling over dead with a grotesque smile on her face. If you gotta go with a smile. And Joker somehow has the power to take over the news feed to helpfully let everyone know he's tainted all of Gotham's beauty products. Although I think the point is he doesn't say they're beauty products. We find that out later. The next news report tells us that no one knows what specifically the poison is in. I love when the news anchors have no makeup on, their hair looks terrible. Could it be in food, alcohol, hygiene products, whatever? Now this is terrorism. If you can't even trust if what you eat is healthy, never mind your blush, your bourbon, or your barbecue sauce. And these days, of course, even food that is technically healthy is not usually very healthy. Joker used his phone book to find Vicky's number and pretend he's Bruce Wayne's assistant, I guess, setting up a date with the lovely photographer at the Flugelheim Museum, a play, of course, on the Guggenheim Museum in New York. But he has a knockout gas pumped into the vents and everyone except Miss Vale passes out because he provided her with the gift of a gas mask. Joker and the boys bust down the doors, play some Party Man on a boombox, love that song, and they destroy as many paintings and sculptures as they can. He is the world's first fully functioning homicidal artist. Who was second? It was on this viewing, I believe I read it online first, but I never noticed the detail that Bob has a notepad and is itemizing the damage they're doing to the paintings, sculptures, and statues that they're destroying. He's a good guy, making note of all these things in that ledger. Bob doesn't just write stuff down, though. He dances mostly in sync with the other guys, but he also tries to slice into a painting with his knife until Joker stops him because the J-Man likes that one, which seems to annoy Bob in a way that says, everybody else got to mess stuff up, so why not me? I feel like there should have been a, hey, you don't appreciate me type payoff to a lot of the ways Joker treats Bobby, but there never is. In fact, Joker ends up killing Bob after Batman stole my balloons during the parade. Bob never gets to rise up against his boss's madness and get his own measure of revenge. Justice for Bob the Goon after all these years. I call for it. Well, anyway, Joker and his thugs come across Vicky sitting there amongst all these passed-out people, and he scares the hell out of her with his charismatic insanity. But Batman has been watching all this from above, I guess, and waits for the perfect moment to crash through the skylight so he can get his one-night stand out of danger. It's like in the robbery in the opening scene of this movie. He doesn't stop it as soon as he could have, even though far worse things could have happened while he waited to make his grand entrance. Joker has yet another great line as Batman and Vicky ride a cable out the door when he asks his lugnut employees, where does he get those wonderful toys? I read years ago about a button to this scene, and I think they did shoot it, but cut it out. I don't know why. When the next line to his guys is, well, go and ask him. So, where does he get those toys? Go and ask him. That's a great touch for this maniac to say. The kind of thing he would say. We're introduced to the Batmobile when Vicky is told to get in the car. What a cool ride. Its design is iconic for a very good reason. I never liked the Tumbler in Nolan's Batman films as much as this Batmobile, or even the car they used in the 60s TV show. So this one's the best one, but the TV show one is great, and the Tumbler is fine. And on that note, the dark black, bulletproof, rubber batsuit that Keaton wears was so appropriately different from the blue and gray outfit and underwear that Adam West wore in the 60s TV show. And Keaton's costume in this movie is as good as any of the Batmans ever are. They look different. If you look online, you'll find stuff that shows all the Batmans in their costumes. And of course, they're basically the same, but there are definitely changes. Anyway, it's a nice outfit. Batsy and the boys get into a car chase through downtown Gotham with a cool move where Batman uses a cable to help him get around a hard corner right in front of the infamous Monarch Theater, because behind that's where his parents died. He loses some of the goons with that move after they crash into each other, but then he's cut off and he and Vicky have to jump out of the Batmobile and head down an alley on foot. Oh no, not an alley! Stay out of there! Vicky ends up on a roof for safekeeping, and she's able to snap all kinds of pictures of Batman in action. He thrashes the thugs, including a swordsman that he jousts with, then just kicks him right in the face and knocks him out. Bob is smart enough not to try the superhero after that. He just drops his knife and runs away. Although the poor guy wasn't allowed to use that knife to slash a painting about 10 minutes ago, and now he doesn't get to use it on his boss's new rival either. But yeah, Vicky got all kinds of pictures of Batman in action, and even got a shot of his face when the bad guys pulled back his mask. They never did check his wallet, though. So Bruce in disguise hustles her off in the Batmobile back to the Batcave. She keeps on ending up at his place. She doesn't know it this time, but she does. First the fundraiser, then their one-night stand, now after this art and assault experience. It's just that this time, she's not in the cavernous but expensive upper level. It's in the man's spacious basement. Oh, bats. I think she might have orgasmed there. Batman gives Vicky the information the press needs to let Gotham know that he's cracked the code to Joker's Smilex ingredients, but he also wants the snapshot she took of him fighting the goons. And we don't know specifically what happened next, but he throws his cape up, the bats in the cave go nutty, and then she wakes up in her apartment the next morning. Now how did Bruce get her into her place that has a teddy bear on the bed without the doorman seeing him? We know Batman's a ninja and has incredible skills of distraction when he's in superhero mode, but nobody saw Batman or Bruce Wayne, or maybe Alfred, drop an unconscious woman off in her own apartment, which looks nice enough to have cameras and plenty of security guards. The rich. You know how they're able to get away with everything? It's because they can afford to. Anyway, Vicky gets the info to Knox, and they use the power of the press to get the word out that Batman cracked the code. In case you're worried about all this here in 2024, lest you turn into a laughing person with a creepy smile, you need to avoid using deodorant with baby powder, hairspray, and lipstick. Lucky for me, if I'd been a Gothamite in 1989, I would be in the clear. I never used those last three things, so there can be no chain reaction in my bathroom. The Smilex would do nothing. I guess Alfred just wants to marry Mr. Wayne off to whatever lady will sleep with him on the first date, so he strongly urges Bruce to tell Vicky his big dark secret. Bruce knows this apartment pretty well, since he snuck her in there a day or two before, and it's a nice place, lots of space. I love that Joker says the same thing when he comes in there. And he does this so he can tell her the truth about who he is. Bruce, by the way, wears a huge suit jacket in this scene. Is this another example of rich people who don't know how to dress, a la Trump or Elon Musk? Look, I don't know anything about fashion either, but this suit jacket has got to be an extra large, maybe a triple XL. In any case, Brucey Baby struggles to find the words to say, I'm Batman, before Joker comes a-callin'. See, Joker's hurt that Vicky ran off with that sideshow phony before they could get to know each other a little better. He didn't get his little song or his little dance. Also, Alicia decided to kill herself, although it's interesting how unimportant she's been to the plot considering Grissom had his number one guy killed because that number one guy was sleeping with her. And that rat out at Access Chemicals over a woman got Grissom killed. Such big plot points for a character they just kill off screen. Also, Joker killed her, didn't he? It wasn't a suicide, right? Anyway, Bruce has to be Bruce and he doesn't have any of his bat paraphernalia, so he decides to just get in the Joker's face. Bruce Wayne wants to get nuts. Let's go crazy. Let's get nuts. Probably my favorite Prince song. Until the villain pulls a gun, says his AFI-nominated line about dancing with the devil in the pale moonlight, and shoots Brucey Baby right in the chest. Luckily, Jokey Joke didn't aim for his face, or his stomach, or his testicles, or his knees. Instead, he shoots the billionaire right where he had hidden a tray from Vicky's bedroom, using it as a bulletproof vest. I always get a kick out of the button of this scene. Joker leaves in an over-the-top way, while Bruce somehow slips away unnoticed too, although he should be really hurt from that gunshot, whether the platter stopped it or not. But here's the button. Vicky opens the present the Joker brought, which has a Jack-in-the-Box hand pop out with some dead flowers in it. Understandably, this beleaguered woman who came to Gotham just to get a picture of Batman faints after all this insanity. During a press conference where the mayor announces the Goodwill Festival will be postponed, Joker's crack television staff cuts into the feed and he takes over, saying he wants a truce and will show up to the festival to drop $30 million in cash on the crowd. No checks. Joker also challenges Batman to show up to have a big fist fight, the big Duke-a-roo, which is what takes Bruce to Nostalgia Lane. He's watching this on, not an alley, a lane this time. He's watching this on TV in the Batcave, then it flashes back to the night his parents were killed in that alley, and he finally realizes it was Jack Napier as a psychotic younger thief who did it. Of course, Batman canon is that Joe Chill murdered the Waynes, but in this flick it's Napier to tie the two together. That made one or two fans of the comics pretty mad back then in 1989, I think, and even now. One or two. No more, just one or two. Well, now Bruce is really motivated to get his vengeance, which suits our needs because this is Revenge Month on this channel. And then Alfred brings Vicky into the Batcave. They're going to try to love each other, maybe. Right now, he's got to go to work. Let's backtrack a bit. Bruce wears glasses sometimes in this movie, right? Including when he's working in the Batcave in this scene. I guess they aren't a Clark Kent-esque front if he wears them even when he's alone. His eyes just need artificial help, just like me. Which made me wonder, does he wear contacts when he's Batman? Can you imagine if one of those popped out during a bat brawl? He's right in the middle of beating on somebody, then has to drop down to his knees and leaf through the crap on the ground to find a contact. Wait, everybody hang on a second. Let me find my eye help. The Batmobile itself drives into Axis Chemicals, and let no one tell you that Batman never kills anyone on purpose because the car drops a bomb and blows the place all to hell. They may be horrible criminals who deserve this, but surely this aggression just killed a lot of people. But Joker wasn't even there. He's in a chopper taunting the Junior Birdman that he missed his target. I like the touch, by the way, that a guy who has turned into a leering clown in this very chemical plant doesn't decide to work out of his fiend boss's high-rise. Nope, he turns that chemical plant that made him into the man he is today into his office. And Jack Napier does have an aptitude for chemistry, so he's in his element. Or he was until now, before the Man in Black just went ahead and burned that son of a bitch to the ground. Got a little Stone Cold Steve Austin reference in there. So we're off to the parade. Joker, Bob, and some other goons are on the main float, dancing and celebrating as they ride through the heart of the city. WXYZ. They toss out huge wads of cash on the greedy crowd as Vicky takes pictures. But Batman had more moves in him than just that car assault. He's got the Batwing, which he flies overhead, as Joker gleefully announces that he's going to poison everybody. But his plastic surgeon is a wise man, maybe not a very good doctor, and said, if you gotta go, go with a smile. No one seems to catch on that this little speech is a reason to run. They are that greedy, I guess. So the now top mobster in Gotham just releases Smilex gas from all the parade balloons. Where are the cops during all this? Was there a plot element, something I missed, where they breathed in the gas first and were completely neutralized? Also, there's a lot of carnage in the last quarter of this movie, but I got wondering just how many bodies were lying around in the street, poisoned by Smilex, big smiles on their faces, while Batman, Joker, and Vicky ended up trying to get to the church on time. At least some contractors got some steady work for a while, cleaning up the mess and dealing with all the dead bodies. So business did come back to the downtown, Mr. Mayor. Just as the gas starts pouring out of the balloons, Knox gets a mask from his trunk, while a non-mask wearing Vicky somehow doesn't get poisoned inside his car. She rolls up the windows, but still. I guess it's airtight or something? He apparently drives a ventless automobile, and she's the beneficiary. Alex ends up passed out in garbage and somehow not breathing in the Jokester's grin gas, while Batman uses the wing to snag all of Joker's balloons and get them out of there before they can do too much damage. I love the offended and sad way that Nicholson says, "Those are my balloons," before getting mad with, "He stole my balloons! Why didn't somebody tell me they had one of those things?" Fair question, sir. The scouting report on that bat fellow was very flawed, and I guess Bob is to blame because Joker shoots him dead. Apparently something Burton cut out of this sequence, probably for pacing, is that the money Joker is tossing out to the crowd was counterfeit. His face was in the middle of the bill, just like he said he wanted when Vicky asks, "What do you want?" when they first meet in the museum. "My face on the $1 bill." So all those people fell over each other and trampled others and inhaled Smilex gas, and some of them definitely died, and it was all for funny money? Now that is a sinister angle that at one time was going to be in this movie, and they should have left it in, I think. I wouldn't have pegged the Joker as a big fat liar, but here we are. Hey, how about my movie in a nutshell, right here? I do have one this week. I don't always do them in solo shows. So, Batman in a nutshell. This is the shortest parade in history. We see a clock on the wall during all this carnage, and it's only a couple of minutes after midnight when hell has broken loose. Joker said he would drop cash on the crowd at midnight, and I guess he and his guys arrived right on time, although they could have been a little early. But no matter what, the parade only lasted for a few minutes. The Yelp reviews will not be kind. Batman brings the Batwing back around and readies the machine guns, but somehow misses Joker, who's standing right in the middle of the street, just inviting the gruesome SOB to blow him away. I never understood why Batman's guns and his bombs and things don't hit that target, the Joker, but somehow Joker remains unscathed. Then he pulls a comically huge gun out of his pants and shoots down the Batwing. Well, it lasted longer in the air than a Boeing airplane does these days. Vicky runs up to find that Batman isn't in the cockpit. Joker comes up from behind and puts the super-duper long gun barrel to her head, leading her into the Gotham City Cathedral. I guess we can add kidnapping to his list of crimes. He calls his chopper to pick them up on the church roof in 5 minutes. Okay, 10. But Batman got into a heretofore unknown hidden part of his little plane, and he's still kicking. He may be bloody and wounded, but he's able to limp after them as they climb the stairs. If only this man had some sort of utility belt with a rappelling hook on it, so he could narrow the gap. Joker and Vicky get to the roof in less than 10 minutes because the helicopter is nowhere to be found, but the J-Man tries to use a brute force tactic on anyone who might follow up the stairs. He sprays acid from the flower in his lapel to burn through the bolts on a giant bell. That's the same flower that sprayed acid in Alicia's face before she showed up in the museum with a Phantom of the Opera mask to cover up the hideous scar, and the same flower he tried to hit Vicky with in the museum. The bell crashes through the staircase, blocking the cops from following. I love that Gordon thinks he can push this giant bell by himself. Batman, though, avoided being crushed and has just enough staircase left to climb up. Still not using that utility belt to find a cable to make this quicker and easier, though. The Batman gets to the roof and has to fend off Joker's assorted goons, while his rival forces the Lady Shutterbug to dance. In the pale moonlight, in fact. The man who won't kill does kill some more human beings, including a big black guy who almost gets the best of bats before Mr. Wayne bashes his head against another bell that wasn't burned off its bolts. That brawny bastard is sent falling to his hollering death. I get a kick out of how after Vicky sees that Batman is still alive, she pretends to be suddenly sweet on Joker, which is what he really wants anyway, so he's distracted enough to let Batman interrupt and start beating the living crap out of him. Batman quotes the devil in the pale moonlight line, and a few other things Joker had said as they brawl. A scrap the Joker actually might have won if he had stopped taunting Batman and Vicky so much. He managed to pull them off the roof and they're barely holding onto the ledge. I don't know how she is, as he dances on the ledge over them. But just as the chopper comes to pick him up, it's the chopper. Batman suddenly remembers that he has handy devices on his belt, and he cables the Joke Man's legs to a gargoyle, which after a few seconds yanks the clown off the helicopter's ladder and sends him falling to his screaming death. It's Disney-esque, meaning the hero doesn't out-and-out murder the villain in a 100% clear-cut way, but the bad guy dies from earth impact, basically because of inaction by the hero, or I guess this isn't really inaction in this case. And how about this callback? Joker falls into the chemicals in the first act, then he falls to his death in the last act, and it's Batman's fault both times. Even though Vicky and Bruce lose their grip and start falling to their own screaming death, Batman pulls out a grappling hook. Hey, he's got those, he remembered it, and manages to save them both, even though the torque when the hook caught hold up top should have torn Vicky right out of his arms and ripped him in two. So there should have been no, just, splat. But they did live, and Joker did not, even though he gets the last laugh with a cackling voice box dealie. So a short time later, Batman is finally thought of as a hero by the press and by the mayor, DA, commissioner triumvirate. Gordon even gets to be the one who shows the assembled crowd the bat signal. He gave us the signal. Alfred drives Vicky home while Batman stands and looks at his logo, his symbol of, hey, we accept you, and we appreciate you for stopping that humorous madman from poisoning us. Burton and Elfman use Beethoven at the very end here. Dun, 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 dun. That was bad at the end there, which is one of my favorite music cues in any movie ever. Also, it's from the 9th, so it's the 9th? The 5th? I think it's the 9th Symphony, which is the greatest song of all time. But I really love the part at the end with the bell where it bongs in sync with the song. Dun, dong, dun, dong, dong. So, the cast. Michael Keaton was effectively the lead in the Best Picture winning Spotlight a year after he was indisputably the star of the Best Picture winning Birdman. And in Birdman, he's playing a movie and stage actor who basically played Batman before. We've reviewed both of those films. Beetlejuice 2 comes out later this year, which is why Mike presented an Oscar with Catherine O'Hara a month and a half ago. Oh, and Bev and I neglected to mention during our Oscars post-view podcast last month about how much we enjoyed Keaton's bit with Arnold and Danny DeVito when the twin stars presented an Oscar that night. There were a lot of laughs during this year's Oscars, but we failed to mention when Penguin and Mr. Freeze challenged Batman, who was sitting in the audience and playing along like he was itching for a rematch. Even though Keaton never battled Schwarzenegger in any Batman movie, that was Clooney who did that. Although news broke the day before I recorded this episode that Keaton is coming back for a direct sequel to this movie. That's all the news I have on that at this point. Will Pfeiffer be back as Catwoman, maybe? Although that was a sequel to this movie, too. But she wasn't killed. She had one more life left. Of course, Michael would play the Growly Man again in Batman Returns with Michelle Pfeiffer and Danny DeVito. Before Val Kilmer, George Clooney, Christian Bale, Ben Affleck, and Robert Pattinson all got to take their shot at playing the moody orphan. And I guess if you want to count Lego Batman, that's Will Arnett. And then Mike was finally back in the role in last year's The Flash, which wasn't good at all, but he was fun. He was also the Vulture in the first Tom Holland Spider-Man film, really good in that. He was hilarious as Ken in Toy Story 3. Everything can be all cool and groovy. To the library! The man has plenty of range. He started his career in comedies like Night Shift, and he did plenty of other funny flicks with Ron Howard. But two movies that I love that I don't think enough other people talk about are Ron Howard's The Paper, but also John Lee Hancock's The Founder, the one about McDonald's. So when we talk about the greats of the last 40 years, we should not forget about Mr. Michael Douglas, who goes by Keaton professionally because the Guild wouldn't let him be Michael Douglas for obvious reasons, but that is his birth name. It was also an homage to Diane Keaton, not Buster Keaton, and that's not her real last name either. It's Hall, which is where Woody Allen got Annie Hall from. She was usually called Annie back then, so that's really her name, I guess, that movie's title, rather than Diane Keaton. As much as people beaked off when Ben Affleck was cast as Batman, Batfleck, there was just as much of an uproar when Burton picked Keaton back in the late 80s. If the internet of the 2010s and 2020s existed in 1988 and 1989, I think the online flaming of Keaton would have rivaled the anger over Girlbusters and some of the recent Star Wars movies, and that's saying something. No one seemed to think that Mr. Mom was the right choice, just like most people, including me, thought it was a terrible idea to cast Heath Ledger as the Joker. Maybe not terrible, just not the right casting, but were we ever wrong? And he ended up becoming one of the greatest villains in movie history. While Keaton is, I think, at least the second best Batman after Bale. Hell, I think I might even go with Michael over Christian. It's 1-1A, basically. I guess it was Mike's idea, incidentally, to use a deeper voice when he's in the Bat outfit so that he could distinguish Batman from Bruce Wayne. Then Christian Bale and Christopher Nolan took that growl to a whole other level, especially in the second and third movies. Jack Nicholson was in 3 flicks that ranked on the AFI's Top 100, so we covered them a very long time ago. Easy Rider, Chinatown, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. We've also reviewed Jack in The Shining, Terms of Endearment, Broadcast News, A Few Good Men, and The Departed. So Batman makes 9 Nickel flicks. He's still my favorite actor, so it makes sense that the man will come up so often on this channel. I've recently seen Carnal Knowledge and The Pledge again, both of which are quite good, and neither of which are put on his short list of best films by most people. For other actors, they would be. The man's resume is as good as any actor's, ever. And since Jack agreed to be in this because they gave him a percentage of the gross, and I believe he got a big cut of the Bat merch too, he made an absolute fortune from this one movie. It also seems to be one of his favorite films, of his own at least. He seems to be as eager to talk about this role in the making of featurette on the DVD as he's ever been for any role he's played. It's a shame that Jim Brooks' How Do You Know might be the last film he'll ever make. It will be. But Jack hasn't made a movie in 14 years, and people barely even see him in public anymore, with the thought being that he's not in good health. And the man just turned 87 a week ago. Literally a week ago. Literally. So it's not like we should expect him to be in top form anymore. The Scream Queen, Kim Basinger, won her only Oscar the same year that Jack won his third. That was in 1997 when she won Best Supporting Actress for LA Confidential, while he won Best Actor for As Good as It Gets. Kim has been making movies and TV shows since the mid-70s, but she's also taken long breaks between projects. She's been in some iconic things like this, and she was a first-class beauty in her day, including in this movie. But I think the only other time she'd come up before today, in our previous 585 shows, was in fact the great LA Confidential. And even though this isn't a slasher movie, she is the Scream Queen, or maybe the Shriek Queen. If you played a drinking game and took a swig whenever she hollers, you'd be blitzed right around the time the Joker visits her apartment to find another rooster in the henhouse. She didn't even want the role at first, so they cast Sean Young instead. Then Sean broke her collarbone prepping for a horseback riding scene with Keaton that never even made it into the movie, so they scrambled and managed to get Kim after all. I'm guessing ponying up some major dough was involved, and she wasn't a bit surprised. Robert Wuhl was a lot of fun in Bull Durham the year before this, although he wasn't so good in the Tommy Lee Jones movie Cobb. Bev and I reviewed Bull Durham many years ago, while Chris and I talked about Cobb on Scoring at the Movies, our former sports movie podcast. Chris and I also yapped about Wuhl when we covered Blue Chips. Billy D. Williams will likely never come close to topping his role as Lando Calrissian in The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and many years later, The Rise of Skywalker. He didn't get to play Harvey Dent when they brought the DA back in Batman Forever. They paid him off and gave the role to Tommy Lee Jones because he was the bigger star and was hot off an Oscar, although he's not good in that movie. Tommy Lee Jones is almost always good, not in Batman Forever, even though I like Batman Forever. But Billy D. did do the voiceover for Harvey in the Lego Batman movie. Jack Palance was in Shane, which we of course covered. Shane! And we just covered Contempt back in February, where he plays a sleazy movie producer but has very good taste in women. Like Nicholson and Basinger, Palance became an Oscar winner when he took it home for playing Curly in City Slickers in 1991, 2 years after this. It seems that he and Burton didn't click making this movie. Palance was giving Timmy B the "you're just a kid" treatment, which I think Tarantino got from Lawrence Tierney when they made Reservoir Dogs, which I don't get. If you agree to make a movie with a young director, even though you've been doing this for decades, then yes, of course you have more experience than they do. But the director is the boss. If working with someone you think is just a punk bothers you, don't be in their movie. This issue came up a few months ago when we talked about how Harry Dean Stanton behaved while he was making Repo Man with Alex Cox. And Stanton is an old Nicholson friend, and I think I said in that podcast that that's something Jack never does with directors. You're in charge, it's your movie, I'll do what you want. That's what I heard anyway, maybe Jack wasn't always like that. Michael Goff played Alfred in the 2 Burton Batmans, then also in Forever and Robin. He and Pat Hingle as Gordon are 2 of the few cast members who kept coming back for all 4 of the 80s and 90s Bat efforts. He continued working with Tim Burton into the 2000s, Goff that is, often in voice roles in Timmy's animated flicks. Goff worked for over 50 years, including being a Best Picture winner, Out of Africa. Jerry Hall did more modeling than acting, but she also married Mick Jagger and Rupert Murdoch. I bet she has a lot of crazy stories to tell. So yeah, she did act in other things, but this was about as substantial a movie as I can see on her resume, and it's very substantial, of course. And she's fine in this as Napier and Grissom's tragic girlfriend, but then killed off screen. Suicide off screen, supposedly. Pat Hingle started his career in an uncredited role in On the Waterfront, which we've covered, and he played Commissioner Gordon 3 more times. The Patster was also in Talladega Nights, which Chris and I covered on Scoring at the Movies a few years ago. His rival cop, William Hootkins as Eckhart, get me Lieutenant Eckhart, was in more big movies than you might think. He's Eckhart here, of course, but he was Porkins in Star Wars, and he had a role in Raiders of the Lost Ark, too. He was even in Superman 4 a few years before he played this mob-connected cop in 1989. Tracy Walter is the last cast member I'll highlight. Bob the Goon had that small role as the "Ew, you have AIDS" librarian in Philadelphia, a movie I reviewed last fall. He was also in Repo Man, which Bev and I discussed just this past January, and he worked with Jack Palance 2 years later when he played the Chuckwagon guy in City Slickers. The director was, of course, Tim Burton. Like Keaton, he isn't a comic book guy, and it sounds in interviews that he isn't even a particularly big fan of his own movie here. He's wrong about that one. Bev and I tackled Edward Scissorhands back in early January 2016. In fact, that was the very first podcast we posted after we finished the AFI's Top 100 list, which was the original point of this podcast, the AFI list. But that's it for Burton Flicks on this channel. For the good, for the bad, and sometimes for the grotesque, this is a man with a vision all his own. He's made enormous hits like Alice in Wonderland, which I thought was mediocre, but for many people, The Honey is Pee-wee's Big Adventure or Beetlejuice. They're fine, but for me it's Batman, and maybe even more so, the great Ed Wood. And he'll be at the helm of that new Beetlejuice flick that comes out this September. He's somewhere in the list of greatest directors of fantasy films, ever. Top 20 anyway, I would say, right? Sam Hamm and Warren Skoren, S-K-A-A-R-E-N, wrote the script for the film that was shot over in London. They based their yarn on Bob Kane and Bill Finger's characters from the comics. It does say Bob Kane in the credits on this, but it should have said Bill Finger. I read that was rectified somewhere, but it wasn't on the print that we saw. Hamm got story credit on Batman Returns, too, then wrote and produced Monkey Bone nearly 10 years after that. I wasn't a fan of that one. He's nearly 70, but hasn't written a screenplay in nearly 20 years. As for Warren Skoren, he died of cancer the following December. He had worked on Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop 2, and Beetlejuice before this, but Batman was unfortunately his final movie credit. Peter Guber and John Peters were producers, while big kudos should go out to Ray Lovejoy for his editing and Roger Pratt's cinematography. Of course, Danny Elfman's score is fantastic. I've said that plenty of times already. But the biggest behind-the-scenes name of them all is a different musician, and it's Prince. His songs, which are on my iPhone to this day, are still cool, and Bev and I enjoyed rocking out to them while we watched the movie last week. Party Man, Trust, Bat Dance, and yet no Oscar nomination for any of them. Party Man especially was robbed. Okay, maybe Bat Dance wouldn't have been eligible because I don't think it's technically in the movie, but those songs still rock, even 35 years later. Now, even though I've had a lot of fun poking Burton's movie in the ribs today, I remain a giant fan of Batman. Bev was impressed just how many lines I could quote verbatim in this film, even a lot of the obscure ones. The Dark Knight has taken on a life of its own, mostly because of Heath Ledger, but I think I have seen and will continue to see this movie even more often than I've seen and will see that. This is a fun time at the movies, despite the dark subject matter, and for a guy who supposedly didn't even know anything about comic books, Burton sure made this look a lot like a comic. At least we thought so. The design and the look and the sound are terrific, the cast is great, Nicholson has so much fun doing this, and Keaton sure was able to shove it back at people who doubted him. Big Batman guy over here. Oh, and one last story. Part of the reason I like this movie, actually, is because my nephew Matt watched it every morning back when he was Matthew, and when he stayed with us for the summer somewhere around 30 years ago. He was 5 or 6 years old and he loved this flick. I liked it before that summer, but I think I actually grew to like it more, not less, even though him running the videotape every day should have made me sick of it. That's impressive rewatchability and staying power. And look at the other films that came later. Their quality is up and down, but I watch nearly any of them right here, right now. I might even give Batman and Robin another shot. I've never seen it a second time. So that was how I saw Batman. And that's it for Revenge Month. We saw a lot of people kill a lot of other people in the past 29 days. Vengeance was theirs. So let's get away from theme months for a while and just review movies for their own sake. Although Friday's show won't exactly be a joyous affair, we're not going to change tones that much. And of course, this movie is fun, like I've been saying. But I'll be monologuing about love and romance, so that's nice. But it will be a tragidrama called Dark Victory, one of Bette Davis's finest hours. Next Monday, as I've said, Bev will not be in your ears. She's in a good place from the recovery of her foot surgery as I record this episode, but she'll continue to be off podcasting for a while. For one thing, climbing the stairs to the podcast room and then back down again is not easy. She has to limit her trips up and down the stairs. So it's Dark Victory on Friday, and then on May 6th, I'll finally cover the great gangster flick, Little Caesar. It'll be just me talking about the end of Rico. Want to talk back to us? You can. Email is always an option. Our address is haveyoueverseenpodcast@gmail.com. We're open to getting some tweets, too. My Twix handle is @MovieFiend51, and Bev's is @BevEllisEllis. She uses that same handle for her Threads account. Ever since the beginning of 2023, we've been posting our podcasts on YouTube. The key to type in your browser to find our channel are @HYESEllis. That, or just be on YouTube and type "Have You Ever Seen" into the search bar. Crush that thumb up button if you dig what we say, subscribe to us, comment, and do all that, or at least some of that, plus rate and review our show in your podcast app. And before I bid you adieu and say goodnight, I'll suggest you see what the deal is with Sparkplug Coffee. They give our listeners a 20% discount if those listeners use our HYES promo code. So it's sparkplug.coffee/HYES. Okay, time to stand on a post and admire my logo. Thanks for listening to me yap about the bat today. Join me on Friday when I talk about Miss Davis, and then next Monday when I talk about Mr. Robinson. Meantime, I'm going to need you to leave me alone so I can brood in my mansion, or in this small, semi-detached century home where I actually live. There's no Batmobile out front. That would be ridiculous. But just as long as I'm allowed to brood, that's non-negotiable. And cut!